Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hit that button right now because you won't want to miss the kind of stories and hidden treasures we uncover here. Real pieces of history that can still change lives today. Now, imagine this for a moment. You're sitting at your old wooden desk, maybe sorting through a box of old coins that's been sitting in the back of a drawer for decades. You can smell the faint hint of metal and dust, maybe even the scent of an old tobacco pouch that's been there since the 60s. Your fingers brush against a small copper coin. It's worn, smooth on the edges, but the lettering catches the light. 1/2 cent, 1963, South Africa. You hold it up, and for a second, you feel something unusual. Most people would think, it's just a 1/2 cent, nothing special. But this, my friend, is no ordinary coin. To understand why, we need to go back to a time when South Africa was changing fast, 1963. The country had just moved away from the British pound system and adopted its own decimal currency, the rand. The government minted a few experimental runs of coins that were never widely circulated. Among them was the 1/2 cent piece, a tiny coin that represented both a beginning and an ending. See, by 1963, copper coins were being phased out in many places due to rising metal costs. The 1/2 cent was supposed to be a symbol of independence, of South Africa's new identity. But as history would have it, the minting process didn't go as planned. Only a handful of these coins were ever produced, and most were melted down before they even left the mint. But somehow, a few escaped. Now, this is where the story gets interesting. These coins weren't just small change, they were witnesses to history. They carry the markings of a turbulent era, an era when every symbol on a coin had political meaning. The springbok, that proud antelope featured on so many South African coins, stood for endurance, grace, and freedom of the land. But for collectors, what makes the 1963 1/2 cent truly fascinating is that it sits at the crossroads of rarity, symbolism, and survival. You see, coin collectors, serious ones, are not just interested in gold and silver. They're interested in stories. The 1/2 cent of 1963 has all the makings of a legend. Minted in secret, recalled in silence, and rediscovered decades later by those who knew what they were looking at. There are whispered accounts among old collectors that one of these coins surfaced in a small coastal town in the Western Cape, found in a jar of mixed change left behind in a deceased estate. The man who found it didn't realize its worth. He took it to a local market, thinking he might get a few rand for it. But when a dealer saw the coin's date and mint mark, he went pale. He quietly asked the man, "Where did you get this?" From that moment, the story of the 1963 South African 1/2 center began to spread like wildfire among numismatists, coin experts, around the world. It was confirmed that only a tiny number had ever been produced. Some say less than 10 exist today, and only a few of those are in near-perfect condition now. What makes this coin so valuable isn't just its rarity. It's the combination of rarity, age, and historical context. Every mark on that copper surface tells a story of a nation finding its own identity in the midst of change. It's not just a coin, it's a time capsule. When you hold it in your hand, you're holding 1963 itself. The sound of old radio news, the smell of leather car seats, the distant echo of a new national anthem, and the feeling of a country stepping into the unknown. All of that, locked inside a single 1/2 cent. Collectors in the United States, the United Kingdom, and even Australia have long sought this coin. Some have spent years searching auctions, visiting estate sales, and negotiating quietly through private networks, all for a chance to own one of these elusive pieces. And every time one changes hands, its value skyrockets. Older collectors, especially those who remember the 1960s, often say this coin reminds them of a time when things were simpler, when every object had craftsmanship and meaning. There's a sense of nostalgia attached to it, something that today's digital world can't replicate. And here's the part that fascinates me most. The 1963 1/2 cent doesn't dazzle you with gold or silver. It's small, humble, and unassuming. Yet it commands attention because it represents something deeper: the passage of time, the endurance of history, and the fact that even the smallest things can hold the greatest value. For the men who appreciate fine detail, who've lived through the rise and fall of decades, this coin is more than a collector's item. It's a reminder that value doesn't always come in bright packaging. Sometimes, value is born out of rarity, survival, and story. Now, let's talk about condition. Experts say that the few surviving 1963 half-cent coins differ slightly in tone. Some show a rich reddish hue from pure copper, while others have darkened over time into deep brown. Those that have been preserved in original mint condition, untouched by human hands, are considered priceless. Even a small scratch or imperfection can affect its worth dramatically. And yes, there are replicas and fakes out there, but true collectors can always tell the difference. The weight, the sound, the microscopic details around the rim, all of it speaks to authenticity. If you ever come across one, don't clean it, don't polish it, and definitely don't sell it at a flea market. You might be holding a piece of history worth more than any gold coin in your collection. The legacy of the 1963 South African half-center continues to grow as stories surface of old families discovering one hidden in an attic box or buried among old foreign coins collected during travels. Each discovery adds another layer to the myth, a reminder that even in forgotten corners of the world, treasures still wait for those who know how to look. So, the next time you're sorting through old coins, take your time. Look closely. Don't dismiss the little ones, because sometimes the smallest piece of metal can carry the weight of an entire era. And now, the question you've been waiting for: what is this coin really worth today? Well, in recent years, collectors' markets have gone wild. The 1963 South African half-center, in perfect condition and verified authenticity, has reached unbelievable heights in private auctions. Yes, you heard that right. One of these coins has been valued at an astonishing $22 million. That's right, $22 million for a single half-cent coin. That it's a reminder that history, rarity, and passion can turn even the smallest coin into a priceless treasure. So, subscribe if you haven't already, because this is the kind of hidden story we uncover every week. Who knows? Your next great discovery might already be sitting in your own drawer, waiting for its moment to shine. Before we dive into the story you're about to hear, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon. Because here, we uncover the hidden treasures of history, the forgotten stories behind rare coins, and the incredible fortunes that might just be sitting in your drawer right now. Now, let's take a quiet step back to the early 1970s. The world was changing fast. The radio was still king in many homes. Television had that warm glow of family evenings, and the coins in your pocket actually meant something. They carried stories, weight, and a kind of craftsmanship that today's money rarely captures. And in 1971, deep in the heart of South Africa, a small, unassuming coin rolled off the minting presses. Barely half an inch across, made of bright bronze, it was the South African half-cent, a coin that most people never even noticed. To the ordinary man, it was just pocket change, the kind of coin you'd toss in a jar or hand to a child for candy. But to collectors today, it has become something far greater. Let's picture it. One side carried the proud South African coat of arms, the symbol of a young nation still defining its identity. The other side, a delicate image of two sparrows, simple yet full of life. Designed by the artist Coert Steinberg, the same sculptor who created the iconic Springbok design for South African coins. This small half-cent was part of a short-lived chapter in the nation's numismatic story. Now, here's where things get fascinating. In 1971, the South African Mint produced thousands of these half-cents. They weren't rare at first. In fact, they were so common that most people didn't even bother to keep them. But as years went by, the value of the coin dropped to almost nothing, and the half-cent was eventually discontinued altogether. By the 1980s, they were gone from circulation. People threw them away, melted them down, or lost them forever. And that, my friends, is how rare treasures are born, not through deliberate creation, but through quiet disappearance. Over the decades, collectors began to realize that some of these 1971 half-cents had been struck in limited numbers, and even more intriguingly, a few were struck in proof condition, pristine, untouched by circulation, with mirror-like fields and razor-sharp details. Those few coins became the stuff of legends among collectors, whispered about at auctions and private sales. But why would anyone pay attention to a coin that once bought a stick of gum? The answer is simple: history, rarity, and the thrill of owning something that time itself tried to erase. You see, for many collectors, especially those of us who grew up in the age of real money, when a coin had weight, when silver shone in your hand, these tiny artifacts aren't just metal. They're memories. They're moments you can hold between your fingers. The 1971 South Africa half-cent represents the end of an era, the last breath of a simpler economic time before inflation, before paper and plastic took over. Now imagine this. Somewhere, sitting quietly in a box, maybe passed down from a father or grandfather, there's one of these coins. And not just any one. A perfect specimen, brilliantly uncirculated. A coin that somehow survived 5 decades without a single scratch or mark. Maybe it was set aside by a mint worker. Maybe it was part of a collector's estate, forgotten for years. And when that coin finally surfaced, it changed everything. Because one of those 1971 South African half-cent coins, in perfect condition, verified and authenticated, shocked the collecting world. It was auctioned not for hundreds, not for thousands, but for a staggering $14 million. Now let that number sink in. $14 million. For a coin that once wasn't even worth a full cent. How does something like that happen? It's not just rarity. It's story. It's legacy. It's the kind of magic that happens when history, art, and nostalgia collide. For many collectors, that coin became a symbol of the lost craftsmanship of the minting world. A reminder that even the smallest things can carry enormous value, not just in money, but in meaning that if you were around in the early 70s, you'll remember the feel of coins like this in your pocket. Maybe you had one and never even thought twice. Maybe you traded one at a corner store. Imagine now that very coin being worth more than a mansion, more than a lifetime of work. It's enough to make any man glance twice at the old coin jar on his shelf. But here's the truth behind every great coin story. Most of these valuable pieces aren't just luck. They're the result of sharp eyes, patient collectors, and people who respect history. Those who kept their coins clean, dry, and stored properly now hold pieces of metal that the world suddenly wants back. And if you've been collecting coins for years, or even if you're just starting to look through what your father or grandfather left behind, this story should tell you something powerful. Never underestimate the humble coin. Especially those small ones, the forgotten ones, the ones nobody cared about. Because sometimes, that's exactly where the treasure hides. So, take a look at your collection. Pull out that old album. Check the dates, the mint marks, the details. You never know what you might find. It might be a South African coin, a British penny, an old US wheat cent, each one with its own story waiting to be rediscovered. And when you hold that 1971 half-cent in your hand, remember this: it represents more than money. It's a connection to time, to craftsmanship, to the men and women who shaped and struck it half a century ago. Every scratch, every gleam of bronze, every tiny line on that coin carries a whisper of the past. And for one lucky collector, that whisper turned into a fortune. $14 million worth of history, art, and legacy. That if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales about coins that changed lives, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. Because there are still hidden treasures out there, waiting to be found, maybe even in your own pocket. Pause. This was the story of the 1971 South Africa half-cent, a coin that went from half a cent to $14 million.